Hello, everyone. It's Monday, January 31st. Last day of a great month, a little chilly and a little bit of snow, but good stuff, good stuff. We've had 20 additional deaths since Friday. Now, don't be, confused or led inappropriately with this, but we've had 20 additional deaths, and because sometimes over the weekend, it's not reported, as best as we'd like it to be reported. Nevertheless, we're up to 5,733 deaths. The 5,700th. Well, this can't be right. We've got a mistake here. We're up to 5,763 deaths. But the 5,744th death is a 56-year-old female from Mercer County. The 5,745th death is a 76-year-old male from Jackson County. The 5,746th death is a 72-year-old male from Ohio County. The 5,747th death, a 79-year-old male from Jefferson County. The 5,748th death, a 54-year-old male from Kanawha County. The 5,749th death, a 74-year-old male from Harrison County. The 5,750th death, a 42-year-old male from Roane County. The 5,751st death, an 86-year-old male from Monongahela County. The 5,752nd death, a 52-year-old female. The 5,752nd death, a 52-year-old female from Jefferson County. The 5,753rd death, a 74-year-old male from Pleasants County. The 5,754th death, a 74-year-old male from Kanawha County. The 5,755th death, a 61-year-old female from Monongahela County. The 5,756th death, a 74-year-old male from Jefferson County. The 5,758th death, a 60-year-old female from Randolph County. The 5,759th death, a 79-year-old female from Mineral County. The 5,760th death, a 79-year-old male from Marion County. The 5,761st death, a 48-year-old female from Mineral County. The 5,762nd death, a 92-year-old male from Raleigh County. And the 5,763rd death in West Virginia is a 67-year-old male from Ohio County. I don't know how many times I got to say it, but 5,763 deaths in West Virginia. It'd be easy to let these people just become a number, but please, to God above, don't let that happen. Active cases are 15,490. Our new positive cases in the last 24 hours, 1,710. Daily positivity rate, we must have not tested much at all, was 17.46%. Our cumulative rate now is at 8.05. Our recovered cases are 425,518. That's bounced up, a good amount, and that's good. We have 1,064 patients in the hospital, 230 on the ICU units, and 116 on ventilators. Our red counties in our state continue to come down, and that's good. I've told you about, the discontinuation of two different types of antibodies, that FDA and I guess the CDC came out and discontinued, in the treatment of the Omicron virus. We do have antibodies that will treat the Omicron virus and everything, but two of the ones we were using, they discontinued. I've told you about the home test. You can get 4 free home tests by going to our covidtest.gov, and it'll direct you on how to get that. The Biden administration is also offering up 3 free N95 masks per person, and they will be made available at the pharmacies. I don't think they're available quite yet, and it may still be that it's the tail end of this week or the first of next week before they're available for you. From a standpoint of a reminder, you know, over 65, age and everything, any kind of health conditions whatsoever, any kind of feeling that you may have where you're not feeling exactly right, please get a test. Please get a test. You know, we can save your life and or at least significantly increase your percentages of making it through this thing if by chance you were positive. From the standpoint of wearing face coverings and everything, I'd highly recommend 65 and older to do that in settings where you were indoors with people you didn't know, and if you had some kind of pre-existing condition, you really got to be careful. There's nothing that I could ever tell you that is more impactful than if you're fully vaccinated and you don't have your booster shot, you're just not thinking right in my book. That's all there is to it. You got to get your booster shots. We continue to, you know, make headway. You know, we're now up to 70.8%. It was 70.7. We're at 70.8% of those 18 and older that have gotten at least one shot, and we're at 89.7% now of the 65 and olders that have absolutely gotten one shot, and we're at 82 instead of 82.3. We're at 82.4% of those 50 and older that have gotten their first shot, and that's good. I mean, we're making progress. It's slow, way slower than it ought to be, but at least we're making some progress. You know, all the COVID vaccine info stuff is up on our website. I encourage you about the free testing. I always thank Fruth and Walgreens for all the good stuff that they've done all through the time we've been at this. We have 160 outbreaks in our long-term care facilities. We have one outbreak in our church community, and that's in Nicholas County. Corrections still has really high numbers, but not quite as high as maybe as they were, but we still have 714 inmate cases at 24 different facilities. I think that was at 27 on Friday, and we have 254 staff cases that we're still handling. I encourage you about your flu shot. You got to get that flu shot and everything, and absolutely you can get it at the same time you get either the COVID vaccine or the booster, either one. I have beat this drum a whole bunch, but absolutely without any question, if you're a renter or if you're a landlord, please contact us and we'll see if we can get you some of these dollars that we have available to us right now. I encourage you about giving blood over and over and over. I've said just that. Check with your physician. See that it's safe. See that it's something that you should do and everything, or you should consider, especially if you happen to be one of these 425,000 that have recovered. You know, you ought to consider this, but you take the advice and guidance of your physician. But you know, if we can get a few more of you, you know, over the finish line as far as giving them blood, you'll save a life. It really helps. Really, really helps. It's a sad, sad, sad thing right here, but Senator Rucker lost her dad, and Senator Rucker does a great job in the Senate, and she served this state really, really well. We want to offer up our prayers in every way. I mean, this family's been through some tough stuff, so please, please, please remember her in your prayers. Senator Patricia Rucker, you know, a great senator for this state, and she lost her dad, and we just hate it really badly. But Kathy and I offer up our prayers, and we'd ask you to please do the same. I've got two more things here real quick. One is I'd surely like you to stay tuned. When I come back to you on Wednesday, we'll have the final numbers on January's revenue numbers. You know, we're trending in a really good way, and in this state, like I said, in the state, you know, this state's really cooking. We're really, really doing good stuff, and this is just going to bring more and more and more goodness to West Virginia. You saw the big announcements of the gigantic companies that are coming and bringing more and more employment to this state. You know, as we continue to pump out these good surplus numbers, that just enables us to do lots and lots and lots of more stuff for the people of this great state. And so So I remind you, to stay tuned on Wednesday, and we'll have the final numbers at that time. But we pretty much know what the revenue is right now, and it looks really strong. And I think we're going to be able to continue about on the same path that we were in the month of December. But those numbers are unprecedented. If you'll go back, way back, here a couple of years ago, we had a surplus, I think, in the month of July of like 32 million, and then came right back behind that in the month of August with a surplus of 34 million and change. And my goodness gracious, we thought we were absolutely it. That's all there is to it. And then we dropped off some a few months and everything, but we ran across the finish line with a surplus, not a lot, but right now, I mean, this train is rolling. That's all there is to it. And so stay tuned on Wednesday. And I've got one other announcement, but West Virginia has joined 2 other Republican governors, the Republican governor from the state of Tennessee and the Republican governor from Virginia. I was contacted over the weekend, by Governor Youngkin, and we discussed this at length, and then I've had a lot of discussion with my people, but the bottom line of the whole thing is just this. The Supreme Court mandate on our hospitals and hospitals in general, that all the staff, all the healthcare people have to be vaccinated or basically terminated. That's just all there is to it. It is putting an additional level of strain on our rural hospitals that is just destroying us. And maybe I misspoke on the Supreme Court. It went to the Supreme Court, but it was a Biden mandate. But it went to the Supreme Court for interpretation. And basically, from what happened in the beginning, it's been upheld. Now, the problem is just this. Maybe we can live with that in our more populated areas, of our hospitals. But living with that in rural West Virginia, where we truly do have some folks that are going to have to be terminated and everything because they just choose not to be, vaccinated, what is that really going to do? It's going to make it tougher and tougher and tougher for us to provide care in our rural hospitals. So I am joining, the governor of Tennessee, the governor of Virginia today, requesting a waiver from the CDC, from the Biden administration for rural hospitals to be able to not have to abide by this mandate. It is only putting additional pressures. It is not saving lives. It is not helping people. In this situation, it is hurting us and hurting us in a bad way. So I'm joining these 2 other great governors, and I salute their efforts and everything. And we'll offer up this. We hope it's not a Hail Mary, but nevertheless, we hope it's just a good, solid play that we're able to get a completion on and be able to help our rural hospitals, because, providing care in a rural area is tough enough, but if we have to lose additional staffing and everything, it makes it dadgum near impossible. So like I said, I commend those great governors, and I thank them, and we're going to join them and try to see if we can get this across the finish line and be able to help our people in rural West Virginia even more. So thank you so much. That's all I got.
All right, thank you, Governor. Let's now go to Dr. Clay Marsh, our coronavirus czar.
Good morning. In support of what the governor has just shared with us, we still see Omicron as the dominant variant in West Virginia. Our most recent sequencing run found that 95% of new cases, and we about doubled the run. So we tested over 600 new cases and found that Omicron was a dominant variant. We also see that today, for the first time since we have been challenged by this new Omicron wave surge, that our RT value across the state has gone under 1. It's 0.97 today. And that is generally an indicator for us that the transmission of the virus is starting to slow. And we see that the number of cases over the last several days seems to have plateaued, at least related to the percent positivity rate. As the governor said, the new cases are down, but also the testing was down over the weekend. So we will wait and see how that stabilizes. But for the past 7 days, we have seen a net reduction in the number of new cases on a 7-day rolling average, which is encouraging for us. We also know that in other states and in other countries, as the cases start to plateau, we know that hospitalizations still follow and generally will still increase. As the governor disclosed today, we have the newest updated numbers are 1,070 West Virginians in hospital beds, which exceeds our all-time high of 1,012. And as we start to look at the relative numbers of people in the hospital, we see that about 70% are fully vaccinated and about 30%, 70% are unvaccinated, about 30% are vaccinated. And we are looking into understanding, are those people boosted as well? Because when we look at the vaccine breakthrough deaths, the people that had been vaccinated who have died, we see that over 92% of those people are over 61 years old. And we know that boosters are very, very important to protect people from dying. Remember, fully vaccinated and boosted Americans over 65 years old have 100 times protection against dying and a 49 times protection against hospitalization. If you talk about those same Americans with just 2 vaccines and no booster, the percent or the protection goes down to 17 times. So we know that boosters are really important, and we really implore our oldest part of our population, our over 65-year-olds and over 50-year-old population that currently have only 57% boost rates and 52% boost rates, to please go out and get your booster. Very, very important. Recent data reported would say that in the United States, if we were as vaccinated as many European countries are, for instance, Denmark, we would have halved, the number of hospitalizations that we've seen during the Omicron pandemic surge. We also know that we are now over 880,000 deaths in our country. In the next week to 2 weeks, we will surpass 900,000 deaths and then 1 million deaths. And that to me is really a testament to the critical importance of people getting vaccinated, because we know in our country that 99% or so of the people that died through the whole pandemic have been unvaccinated. So really, really important that people get vaccinated. Lastly, there is a second variant of Omicron that has caused some problems in other countries. We have not seen that variant, the so-called BA.2 variant of Omicron in West Virginia, although it is in some states in the country. The important understanding about this is the full vaccination protects against that variant, just like it protects against the BA.1 variant, the variant of Omicron that we are dealing with. So full vaccination is protective. Whether or not getting better from Omicron is completely protective is still not known. However, it's likely that there still will be some immune response. So this is not to scare people, but just to recognize that COVID is not done mutating yet, is not done finding ways to bypass what we're doing. So really important for everybody to get vaccinated and boosted, but particularly for our over 50-year-old population and our over 65-year-old population. Please get boosted. That's going to make a big difference. It's going to protect your life, protect our hospitals, and eventually this is the way that we'll be able to go to an endemic mode for COVID-19. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Marsh. Next to Dr. Ayn Amjad, our State Health Officer.
Good morning. If you test positive for COVID-19, staying home and taking care of yourself is very important. So if you're able to use a bathroom that's separate from the rest of your household, that's very important. When you do go out into the rest of your household, to wear a well-fitted mask, and to also notify anyone who you've been in close contact within the last 2 days of your symptom onset. Anyone who's defined as a close contact is someone that you've spent at least 15 minutes or more within the last 24 hours. And someone that we define as a close contact is within 6 feet. So maybe definitely someone within your household, maybe someone that you've shared workspace in, that's someone defined as a close contact. And you'd like for that person to also get tested. You'd also want to contact your medical care provider and let them know that you've tested positive for COVID-19. When you'd want to seek help or maybe go to the emergency room is maybe if you have sharp chest pain that isn't going away, new confusion, inability to stay awake. We talk about someone who has, cold fingertips or turning colors, and maybe you're having really difficulty breathing. You'd also want to tell your provider if you maybe qualify for any of the antivirals or other therapeutics that we've mentioned on the briefing. Thanks, Jordan.
All right, thank you, Dr. Amjad. Retired Major General Jim Hoyer and Secretary Bill Crouch had prior engagements today. They will rejoin us on Wednesday. We'll now go to questions from members of the media. The first today from Kenny Bass with WCHS and Fox 11.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Good Monday morning. First of all, have we heard anything back from the CDC about a request for the second booster? If they never get back with us, what's to stop the state from making its own order and issuing those shots on its own? And also, you mentioned endemic, Dr. Marsh. What's going to be the criteria for us to get to that, where we start dealing with this like it's not that the outcome is exactly the same, obviously, but like it's a flu virus where we treat it on an annual basis rather than this constant code red that we're in that, frankly, we can't sustain indefinitely. Thank you.
First of all, Kenny, let me say, you sound kind of hoarse. Are you feeling bad yourself?
I don't know. I'll have to get that checked out.
Well, I hope not. I hope and pray not. But nevertheless, Kenny, we have not received and I call it a substantive response, from the Biden administration on our request. Dr. Marsh can add to this and everything, and surely the back part of your question, but we're still looking for a response that's just not lip service. I mean, but Kenny, in being anything but critical, you see what's going on in D.C. and you see the advice comes out, and then we completely do a 180 and we go another direction, and that's created a lot of doubt in a lot of people, and that in itself has caused so much trouble. It's unbelievable. But Dr. Marsh, maybe you can answer a little bit more about this.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you, Kenny. Kenny, we know that from data from Israel that the fourth vaccine, the second booster shot, was able to reduce hospitalizations by 3 times in people over 60 years old at risk, and reduce the risk of new infections by 2 times. And certainly as we go forward, we very much, as I mentioned earlier, implore all of our older West Virginians who haven't done it yet, please go get your booster. Really important, because remember, the first 2 shots of the vaccine series, whether it's Moderna or whether it is Pfizer, are very close together, which some people think, instead of one acting as a priming dose to get everything ready, and the second is a boosting dose to remind everybody to boost the immune system, that these 2 doses may well serve as prime dose 1, prime dose 2. So we may well need a booster dose to get the maximum benefit of that vaccine series. And as I said, the people that we know are in the hospital and are dying from COVID-19 who have had 2 doses oftentimes are older and lack that booster dose. So the booster dose is really important. when it comes to turning from pandemic to endemic, it's really, to me, a complex question. Number one, it has to deal with our attitudes and behaviors. And I think for a lot of people, they've made that turn where they are willing to take some risk, live with the virus, dance with the virus, as we've talked about before. But importantly, we need enough immune responsiveness from enough of our population that instead of having new variants circulate dramatically across the world, as we saw with the Delta variant, now we're seeing with the Omicron variant, that there is enough residual immunity that it stops that worldwide spread and isolates the spread into much smaller areas. And I think that many people are hopeful that because of the incredible infectivity of the Omicron variant, it's estimated that perhaps as much as 40% of the US population will have been infected and have some immune function to the Omicron variant when it is finished circulating in our country, that residual immune capability will slow things down. But as we've many times experienced with COVID-19, when we expect COVID to take a right turn, it takes a left turn. So a lot of this capability for us to move to that endemic status will be dependent also on how the COVID-19 virus mutates and whether new variants come up that are more resilient and less responsive to the immunity we have today.
All right, thank you, Kenny. Next, we'll go to Evan Bevins with Ogden Newspapers.
Thank you. I was hoping to hear from Dr. Marsh and Dr. Amjad their thoughts about the request for a waiver for the rural hospitals. Obviously, there's logistic issues there, but from a healthcare standpoint, what the impact and the needs are for that. Thank you.
Dr. Marsh, please, and Dr. Amjad join in as well.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you, Evan. You know, the governor is really articulating a very challenging problem that we have related to staffing. And staffing is a problem in all hospitals, both from the perspective that some workers have decided that things are getting too difficult and are moving to other professions, but other workers either have COVID right now or have been exposed to somebody with COVID-19 and are isolating or quarantining, particularly those that aren't fully vaccinated. And as we look at the really severe staffing shortages, I think the governor and the governors of Tennessee and Virginia are trying to weigh that sort of risk-benefit ratio, because of course we want to see as many people vaccinated and boosted as we possibly can. But that balance between making sure that we can keep the doors open in these rural hospitals and making sure that everybody is fully vaccinated and boosted is a difficult challenge in some areas. So I will certainly bow to the governor's wisdom as the leader of the state to try to balance that. And as the governor articulated, the three governors asked for a waiver as opposed to edicted anything. So I think it will be really important and interesting to see how this works out. But certainly we do understand that there is many higher and more vulnerabilities to staffing in rural parts of our state than it is in more urban, larger parts of our state.
I think 2 years into this pandemic and, us having the vaccine and in rural areas, I think we face challenges that bigger cities don't face. So I think we're at a point where we have to make decisions that are going to suit rural areas that maybe bigger cities don't see. So I think we have to make decisions that are best suited for areas such as West Virginia and rural areas that maybe bigger places don't see. So I think these are just decisions that we're going to have to face and make and go with them, because we have to make them for patients in these types of populations.
All right, thank you, Evan. Next to Charles Young with WV News.
Hi, this is Charles Young with WV News. I was hoping we'd get a little advice from the medical folks about the federal in-home testing that people are starting to receive. I know the first batches have gone out. The governor and others have encouraged people that feel like they have, a cold, tickle in their throat to take a test. Is that what these at-home tests are for? When should you use them, and when should you seek out the other tests? Thank you.
Docs, y'all go. You guys got the ball here.
And you want to start and I'll follow up?
Sure. I mean, I would say yes, because right now, that is some of the symptoms that you would see, Charles. I mean, right now, if someone is having a sore throat, congestion, a headache, we are advising you to go ahead and take a COVID test because the symptoms are so vague. Part of the push of the federal government to get those at-home tests out there are because the tests, if you are to go out to a COVID testing line right now, they're so long. So we're trying to put these at-home tests in your home so you can get them done quicker. So if the test is positive, you're not out there spreading COVID. That being said, they are limited as well. There are not so many that are going out, so we don't want you to use them maybe irresponsibly, but you know, I'm not going to say don't use it because those are kinds of the symptoms that we're seeing. So, you know, maybe if you have a high risk exposure, maybe you're out and about and you hear something, but I wouldn't say don't use it either. So it's kind of a tricky question, but you know, I know right now, you know, if someone is congested, we're telling you to go ahead and use it. So I don't know what kind of advice Clay would give, but I would say yes, use it because that's what the purpose is. Those are the type of symptoms we're seeing and people are testing positive. Clay.
Yeah, so I'll just follow up briefly. I think Ina is correct. Charles, we would recommend that people go ahead and use a rapid test if you have those types of symptoms. We do know, however, that sometimes early in the process of COVID infection, the rapid test might test negative. So if you have a persistence of symptoms and your rapid test is negative, then you should go ahead and follow with a PCR test. If your rapid test is positive in the face of symptoms, then that should be felt to be just as good as a positive PCR test, and you should start to isolate. The other use of these tests would be after 5 days or so of isolation for a positive test, then retesting yourself at 5 days with a rapid test can be helpful. If you're still positive, you may want to go ahead and stay in quarantine for at least day 6, day 7, and you can either test yourself on those days consecutively or wait till day 7 to test yourself. We know from the MBA assessment that at 5 days, people will be somewhere between about, let me rephrase that. At about 5 days, about 35 to 53% of people who tested positive, say by rapid test or PCR test with symptoms, will remain still communicable. By 6 days, that goes down to about 20 to 30%. And by 7 days, that goes down to 16 to 22%. So we know that there is still a group of people who test positive at with PCR or with antigen that can still transmit the virus by day 5. So that's another use for the rapid test. And if you're negative at day 5, then you should feel good about going out and wearing a mask, a well-fitting mask for the remainder of that next 5 days to make 10 days total. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Charles. Governor, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, in going through my stuff, I think Dr. Marsh kind of updated the hospital number from 1,064 to 1,070. Either way, record number. From the standpoint of, asking for that waiver for our rural hospitals, that's been explained two different times, and really, I am very hopeful, even though it may be somewhat of a Hail Mary pass. I am still very hopeful that it would be considered and granted, because our rural hospitals, we do not. We're overloaded right now, and we can't afford to lose anybody. We can't absolutely afford to be firing people and everything. I don't think that there's any place to be doing that. We should be respectful of their values and what they stand for, but we should encourage them. We should encourage them in every way to be vaccinated. There's no question whatsoever, in my opinion, about that. But nevertheless, we can't shut the hospital down. That's all there is to it. We've got people that are a long ways from anywhere, and their hospital is absolutely essential to them. And so So we need that waiver granted, that's for sure. From the standpoint of sending up additional bills, I think we've got 10 plus additional governor's bills that are going up and everything. We wanted to wait till after the state of the state was given. Once, you know, I came down with COVID and everything right the day before, and we had to cancel, and it surely wouldn't have been safe for others to have been here, and there's no way on the planet that I could have possibly been here. And so with all that being said, we got a bunch of governor's bills that are going up, and they're going up right now. One of them is a bill that relates to the terrible drugs, scourge that's going on all across this country, and but with that being said, what's happening is just simply just this. By us having an out-and-out collapse at our southern border, I mean, let's just, I'm just eat up with all the time telling the truth. But what's happened is our southern border has collapsed. And people's the bad guys from all around the world, whether they be from China or Mexico or wherever it may be, the bad guys know it. And the bad guys that are wanting to infiltrate us for bad stuff, such as drugs, the fentanyl, and all that stuff, this is the gateway, the absolute gateway. And so what happens is it floods into this country. And once it hits this country, believe me, it just doesn't stand and hang out right around, right around the border. It goes and infiltrates this country all across our land. And it has come to West Virginia in every way you can imagine. Now just look at this. I want you to pay really close attention to this. But this just came to my desk, just came. But now just think about it. Basically what it is saying is right up here, and you may not be able to read it, but it says, one pill can kill. And then it goes on to talk about the counterfeit pills that are coming into this country. They're coming into this country from the standpoint of the, counterfeit pills, that is oxycodone. That you may think from oxycodone that, it's a pain pill. I've got all this pain and everything. You take it, and it may be very well laced with fentanyl. Now get this right here. They said so far this year the DEA has seized 20 million counterfeit pills. And then it goes on to say more than the last 2 years combined, and these pills are often laced with fentanyl. In addition to that, if that's not bad enough, they have marijuana that they've gotten that has been laced with fentanyl. The long and short of it is just this. We are sending up a bill right now cracking down even harder with absolutely more stringent things and a more stringent crackdown. And it was, all these bills were put together weeks and weeks ago. But we're sending up, and all these bills will be going up in the next couple of days, but with all that being said, we are sending up another bill asking our Senate and House to give us in Homeland Security another level of sledgehammer to these god-awful people that are bringing this poison to our state and to West Virginia. So lots of good stuff going on, but I would warn all West Virginians from the standpoint of pain medication, from the standpoint of marijuana, from the standpoint of whatever it may be, whether it's you should be doing it or you shouldn't be doing it, you have got to weigh in the fentanyl component to this whole thing right now. Because one dose, one pill could very well kill you. Absolutely, please take caution in every way. Last thing I've got is this, and I oftentimes think about this and everything, but I watch Dr. Amjad and Dr. Marsh. Now let's just be real and be fair. Both of them had a great professional life as well as their families. A great professional life. And the work that they've done medically in their lives and everything, or whatever it may be, is off the chart. And what did both of them do? They decided to give up a lot of their life, to give up a lot of their professionalism and stuff that they were doing, and serve West Virginia. So whenever you see them, or you could drop them a card, thank them, because my gracious, they have been fantastic. They have been better than fantastic. And so I just love them to death, and I sit here and just think how blessed I've been, but how blessed the state of West Virginia has been to have them. You know, and here they are today, and here they've been day after day, and they work 24/7 all the time, and you know, so many as well. But I just watched them today, and I just wanted again to thank them, and I thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I absolutely, you know, in every way, ask all West Virginians, if you see them, or it weighs on you to send them a card or whatever like that, do so. They have done so much. They have been so good. So special thanks to both of them. Thank you, guys, and that's all I got. God bless all of you. Thank you.
Senate will come to order. All those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Those in the gallery and those on the floor will please rise as we're led in prayer today by Rabbi Victor Urecki of the Benaiah Jacob Synagogue at Charleston, West Virginia. Please remain standing after the prayer as the senior senator from the 6th leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Rabbi.
Let us pray. Sovereign of the universe, who created us out of love, teach us to love our fellow human beings. Teach us to honor difference with respect. Remind us to approach each colleague today with congeniality, and help us recognize that we are all created in your image. May we keep that in mind as we legislate, when we advocate, and when we look upon each other. At this fateful moment in human history, it has become so hard to maintain your message of love. We separate by ideology, by party, by religion, by nationality and culture. Remind us of the folly of this hatred for the different, for the other. Keep us far from tribalism. Guide us to truly honor you by honoring one another, so that by reaching out in love, we may turn enemies into friends, opponents into partners. Beloved God, bless the members of this chamber. Uplift these honored senators with the twin gifts of freedom and responsibility. At the crossroads of compelling challenges, may these senators honor those they serve with wise and compassionate legislation, bringing honor to your name and blessing to our state. Amen.
Senior Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the members and those seated in the galleries please join me while I recite the pledge. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading of the journal.
West Virginia Legislature, Senate Journal, January 28, 2022. The Senate met at 9:01 a.m. Senator Blair, Mr. President, in the chair.
Senior Senator from Mercer requests unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and the journal be approved. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Further reading of the journal is dispensed with and the journal is approved. Introduction to guest. I'm going to apologize before I get going. I'm going to do my best to get these names pronounced right. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure to welcome our honorary pages of the day. Please stand and be recognized as your name is called. As the guest is the Senator from Summers, Caden Lastly. As guest is the Senator from Raleigh, Muhela Daniels. Nick Sadgwick, and Alexis Snodgrass. As guest is the senator from Pleasant, Kimber Hausfalter, Casey Ketterman, and Collins Mackey. As guest is the senator from Boone, Nicole Robinette. Will the Senate please make these pages welcome? Further introductions. Senator from Raleigh.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we have with us, seated in the President's Gallery, the chaperones for our honorary pages, the parents of Mahala Daniels, Kevin and Cheyenne Daniels, if you would stand, please. And also, Mr. President, we have the father of Alexis Snodgrass, Mr. Philip Snodgrass. If you would stand and the Senate make them welcome.
Further introductions. Senator from Pleasant.
Mr. President, today we have with us, seated in the President's Gallery, the chaperone for our honorary page, Kimber Hausfalter, her father, Mr. John Hausfalter. Would he please stand? Be welcome.
Further introductions. Senator from Boone.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senator from Logan, we're very pleased to have the chaperone of our page here today, Nicole Robinette's grandmother, Glenda Webb. If she would stand and the Senate make her welcome.
Senator from Summers.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the senior senator from the 10th and myself, today we have seated in the President's Gallery the chaperones for our honorary page, Caden Lashley, his parents, Aaron and Kay Lashley. Would you please make them welcome?
Further introductions. Pursuant to Special Rule of Order adopted January 18, 2022, the chair announces that the senator from Jefferson has been approved to vote by proxy and has designated the senior senator from the 17th to vote in her behalf. Communications from the House.
The Clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of House Bill 2562 relating to litter control.
Message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
House Bill 4024, creating a cosmetology apprentice program that allows companies to train employees for practical real-world experience.
Message be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
House Bill 4288, relating to expanding the practice of auricular acudetox to professions approved by the Acupuncturist Board.
Message be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources, then the Committee on Government Organization.
House Bill 4291, relating to authorizing legislative rules regarding to higher education.
Message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Education.
House Bill 4301, reforming membership requirements of Huntington Park and Recreation District Board.
Message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
House Bill 4308, authorizing disclosure of juvenile information to Crime Victims Compensation Fund for investigation and award of benefits.
Message be received and be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. Communications from the Executive.
There are none.
Reports from standing committees.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 86, creating criminal offense of sexual extortion, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
The report be received and under the original double committee reference, the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4067 to make certain agency reports electronic or eliminating certain agency reports altogether, and has amended same and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass as amended. Respectfully submitted, Mark R. Maynard, Chair.
The report be received. Reports from select committees.
There are none.
Introduction of bills, Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that Senate Bill 506 through Senate Bill 514 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system.
Senior Senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent that Senate Bill 506 through Senate Bills 514 be considered and introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Resolutions.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 26 by Senators Smith and Seipolt naming the U.S. Army Tech 5 William B. Thurman King Memorial Bridge.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day. Motions. Petitions.
There are none.
Unfinished business.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 25 naming the firefighter Marvin Layton Hughes Memorial Bridge.
Resolution will be referred to the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. Bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 151, creating license plate recognizing linemen. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think the title is self-explanatory. It just creates a bill that will honor the linemen who work in all kinds of bad weather. I urge passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Senator from Upshur.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to speak to the bill.
Proceed.
Or should I say, sing to the bill. I fully support this bill. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Senior Senator from the 17th, how does the Senator from Jefferson vote?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senator from Jefferson votes yea.
Has every member voted? Has every member voted? Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 192, establishing Civil Air Patrol license plate. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Wetzel.
Again, thank you, Mr. President. The bill and the title is self-explanatory. I urge passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk should prepare the machine. Senior Senator from the 17th, how's the Senator from Jefferson vote?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senator from Jefferson votes yea.
Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 261, requiring video cameras in certain special education classrooms. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Raleigh.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill amends the section of code requiring video cameras in certain special education classrooms. It provides for an extension of the 3-month time period in which the recording must be retained if the time period overlaps summer break. For any school-based camera system that is installed or replaced after April 1st, 2022, it requires the video to be retained for at least 365 days. There strikes through the requirement for the video to be deleted after the applicable time period has elapsed. It deletes language prohibiting a school from allowing regular or continuous monitoring of the video. It requires the school principal or other school administration designee or county designee to view no less than 15 minutes of the video of each self-contained classroom no less than every 90 days, and makes numerous other changes to enhance the cameras in special education classrooms in that section of the code. I urge passage, and I will entertain any questions.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Junior Senator from the 17th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And Senate Bill 261 is a huge move forward in many of our opinions. You know, a couple years ago, both bodies passed legislation as it related to special education because of a situation in the Eastern Panhandle. This bill improves on the move that the bodies put in place a couple of years ago. And the base of this is it allows administrators to review these films in these special education classes. Children that do not, unfortunately, have the ability to speak or are challenged in other ways. This was brought to my attention by a local board member because we've had, unfortunately, 2 issues that have made the press here in Kanawha County in 2 of our middle schools. It's very unfortunate because the losers in this are those special children that unfortunately maybe cannot speak and carry that on. This bill gives school educators another move to make sure that these terrible acts do not happen in the future. I urge passage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. President.
Further discussion? Junior Senator from the 8th.
Yes, Mr. President, I'll be brief. This is a good bill. I asked the body to pass it, and I'd like just to take a moment and thank the senator from Logan and the junior senator from the 17th to introducing this bill and putting it on the agenda. Thank you.
Further discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Senior Senator from the 17th, how's the Senator from Jefferson vote?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senator from Jefferson votes yea.
Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close machine ascertain the results on this question. 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, and not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in affirmative. I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
The Senior Senator from the 17th moves the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than 2/3 of those elected to the Senate having voted in affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 279, authorizing DEP to promulgate legislative rules. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 279 is the DEP's rules bundle. It is designated as bundle number 3, and it contains 8 separate rules. There's a rule regarding ambient air quality standards, a rule regarding standards of performance for new stationary sources. There's a rule regarding control of air pollution from combustion of solid waste, a rule regarding emission standards for hazardous air pollutants, a rule regarding the requirements for management of coal combustion residuals, a rule with requirements governing water quality standards, a rule that relates to underground injections, and a rule regarding administrative proceedings and civil penalty assessment. I'll say that the rule regarding water quality went through the rulemaking, well, they all did. They all went through the Rulemaking Review Committee and the Judiciary Committee. But this is sort of the final step in a process that we started, I think, 3 years ago, Mr. President, to update West Virginia's water quality standards. 3 years ago, we passed a rules bill that made changes to a couple dozen, and there were perhaps another 30 or so that were not addressed by that rule or that legislation. Further study was done. There were work groups, and what's before the body right now is the rule that contains the recommended rule from the work groups, from the Rulemaking Review Committee. Fundamentally, what it does, Mr. President, is it adopts all of the federal EPA recommended criteria for those substances. I'll be happy to try to answer questions. Otherwise, I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Junior Senator from the 8th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 279. Most of the rules I have no issue with, but it's specifically Rule 8.2C. And what it actually does is take from legislative review the interpretation of new rules as it applies to site-specific sites. Now, what's important to know about this is right now, industries or site-specific sites can be pursued through the DEP through a variance that then allows for legislative review. So there's already a process in place for these instances. But what this rule does is it takes our input away as a legislative body, as a rule committee, and I think that, you know, one of the things I learned when I first got here was how important and unique our system is. On the federal government level, the U.S. Congress passes laws, the president signs it into law, then the agencies promulgate rules, but then there's no oversight, by the legislative body. And what we do here in West Virginia is we allow that legislative oversight, and each legislator, whether they're a delegate or a senator, gives voice to their constituency when these rules are promulgated. And it acts as another safety to make sure what actually comes out and what becomes law is good law. Again, site-specific sites can already do this through a variance. In discussion of this, on Rules Committee and in Judiciary, it was stated that, well, we already do this for another rule. We already allow under 8.5A any rules to be promulgated by the DEP to not have to go through the legislative rule oversight and system. But unlike 8.2C, which is before us, 8.5A sets out standards for the DEP to apply. 8.2C does not. In fact, it says specifically that these EPA national recommendations are based upon data that is unavailable, data that's limited. The testimony in committee was it's a moving target. So what we're doing with this specific rule in 8.2C is taking legislative oversight out of something that we know can change day to day or year to year, or even based upon who's the President of the United States. And I don't think we need to go down that road. I don't think as a legislative body and that we should do that. And I don't think the people of the state are in agreement in that regard. The other thing that was said was, well, it still has to go through the EPA process, just like every other rule. And that's fine, and I have no complaint with that, but the argument for this particular change was that it would make it quicker. But the testimony was, with the EPA involved, it's still a long process. So again, there's been no basis provided to establish and to pursue the removal of legislative oversight. And for those reasons, Mr. President, I ask for a no vote on this bill. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question for the Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. To close debate, if I may.
Senator, proceed.
Thank you. I wanted to address some of the concerns that were raised by our colleague, the junior senator from the 8th, and I probably should have mentioned this in the outset, a little more of an overview, but he made some points and said some things which are accurate, but I want to make sure we paint the whole picture. Under the Clean Water Act, the state's rules have to be approved ultimately by the EPA. When we vote upon this, and if the House of Delegates adopts it and it signed into law by the governor, it's still not effective for West Virginia. The DEP has to send it all off to Washington, and what we've done has to be approved by the EPA. And that will be true for all the substances, the levels, the human health criteria established in this rule. There is a provision in the rule mentioned by the junior senator from the 8th for site-specific criteria in a permit. So the way that would work is after the criteria are established for the whole state, Mr. President, if a business or an industry wanted the state to consider different criteria for a substance for a specific site, this rule creates a process for that. And the process would be that application is made to the DEP. It would not come back to the legislature because it wouldn't be a rule in operation for the whole state or all the waters of the state. It would be just for one specific site in connection with an application for a permit. So right now, it's true to say that the legislature does not review every permit that is applied for by a business or an industry in the state. That's not what we do. We do set the criteria, the human health criteria for the whole state. This would allow an application for a site-specific human health criteria at a particular site that would, if analyzed by the DEP first, it would have to be analyzed by the DEP to see if it's safe or appropriate. And then if the DEP believes that it is, that has to be sent off to federal EPA, and federal EPA would have to approve it as well. We learned during the testimony of the committee that this sort of mirrors a procedure that exists with respect to aquatic life criteria. We have human health criteria, we have aquatic life criteria, and there is a procedure similar to this that exists in the establishment of criteria for aquatic life, which is not what's before us today, but the point is what we're considering today is modeled after something we already have. It's a really important issue because everybody in this room, I know, and everybody in the state wants to know that the state government, this legislature, is doing a good job and is going to do a good job, continue to do a good job of protecting the waters of this state from pollutants. And before us now are the specific criteria, the remainder of them, that relate to human health. We put the question to Scott Manrola during the testimony before the committee. He's the chief regulator with our state DEP, and we asked him point blank, is there anything in this rule as it's being recommended by the committee and is now before the full Senate that will jeopardize the DEP's ability to make sure the waters of this state remain pure and drinkable as West Virginia and West Virginians desire them to remain? And he said, no, Senator, you are not jeopardizing anything with this. This follows what we do with aquatic life criteria. So I understand that the senator, junior senator from the 8th, would like for that process to be different in degree, but as I stand here before us, Mr. President, I'm convinced that nothing in this is going to jeopardize the quality and purity of the waters of this state. I urge passage.
Question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Senior Senator from the 17th House, the Senator from Jefferson, vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senator from Jefferson votes yea.
Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine and ascertain the results on this question. 26 yeas, 8 nays, 0 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves that the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 26 yeas, 8 nays, 0 absent and not voting. More than 2/3 of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 441, providing confidentiality of video and other records of correctional juvenile facilities. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 441 would amend a single section of our state code. It's in Chapter 15A, Article 4. I said amend, excuse me, I need to rephrase that. It would create a new section within that article. And the section would be designated as Section 8A. Article 4 relates to corrections management. The new section addresses the confidentiality of juvenile records, and it's juvenile records, records of juveniles, records in the possession of the state in the management of correctional and juvenile facilities. So this relates to records regarding juveniles when they're confined in juvenile correctional facilities or state correctional facilities. And it contains definitions, but it covers video and audio recordings, incident reports and attachments, investigation reports and attachments, and any documents or recordings generated within a facility containing information which would reasonably place the safety of an employee, inmate, or resident in jeopardy. So it requires that those records are protected. And the bill creates exceptions, and it allows exceptions. Those records that I just described can be disclosed to the Secretary of Homeland Security or his or her designees, to law enforcement when release is determined by the Commissioner to be necessary for the investigation or prevention or prosecution of crime, to the Juvenile Justice Commission and its designees, and 4, pursuant to a lawful order of a court of record for use in a civil, criminal, or administrative matter. And it says there's a proviso there that says that any order authorizing those records to be used in one of those proceedings must contain a provision limiting disclosure or publication of those records to the purposes necessary to the proceeding and prohibiting any unauthorized use or distribution of the records. Mr. President, I'd be happy to try to answer questions. Otherwise, urge passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Senator from Cabell.
Will the Judiciary Chair yield?
Will the Senator yield? The Senator yields.
So I missed a day last week because of the ice, so you're going to have to help me out here. I have a client that was sexually assaulted in a juvenile facility when she was 14, and she did in fact go to the Fusion Center, and she did in fact give a video. There was a video, a forensic interview, which included a videotape. So I've been trying to get that for a while. So will the guardian of the victim have access to this information under the bill as it exists now?
Probably only with a court order. Now there is authority. It says the records, and again, I don't know if it's a record that's covered by the Act. Okay, the Act covers records that are basically produced in or by a state correctional facility or juvenile facility. But assuming it's a record that's in that authority or classification of records, it can be disclosed pursuant to a lawful court order of a court of record for use in a criminal, civil, criminal, or administrative matter. So you're probably going to have to get a judge to order the record to be given up if you can't get it otherwise.
Even the victim who's giving the interview has to go to court to get her own interview where she describes being, sexually assaulted at age 14.
That would be the exception to the confidentiality under which, now, let me just say this, there is authority for the record to go to law enforcement when release is determined by the commissioner or his or her designee to be necessary for the investigation, prevention, or prosecution of a crime or crimes, but that's law enforcement, so that wouldn't include the juvenile. I think it's probably, if the juvenile wants to get it directly, it probably is going to require a court order.
Well, yeah, the state police won't give it to me either. So, I mean, are you okay with that policy? Do you think that's the victim herself has to go hire a lawyer and go to court and get a judge to, I mean, what are we trying to save here? I don't understand it.
Well, as you know, and I know my friend from Cabell has a long and distinguished career handling juvenile matters in Cabell County as referee. We have long, strong legal tradition of juvenile records being confidential. We don't let the public or the media or anybody know the names of juveniles, who are charged with actions that would be crimes if they were adults. We don't allow those court files are kept under seal. So this is in that same vein and tradition that those records are going to be kept confidential. That's what this bill says, except in the circumstances delineated in the bill.
I mean, we already have all those laws that do all those things. What is this? Why do we need this?
There are apparently, the bill was brought to us by the department.
Yeah.
Our confidentiality laws are apparently so broad and strong that there's a legal question as to whether or not the records can be used in a proceeding that occurs arising out of the juvenile's incarceration. For instance, if a correctional officer has to physically restrain a juvenile, hold him, or use physical force to control the juvenile, this bill is designed to make those records available if there are, say, for instance, disciplinary proceedings against the officer. The officer says, I had to. It's, this child was out of control, was throwing punches, throwing furniture, and in a grievance proceeding, it might be necessary for an administrative law judge to look at the video record that exists.
Fair enough.
I think that's the point of the bill.
So in that sense, it's loosening up the confidentiality.
I won't say loosening up. I think probably the better way to describe it is clarifying. I mean, I think there are people who argue that those records are already available for that kind of use, but there's nothing with the kind of specificity that I guess it's ambiguous enough that they sought legislation to address it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare them. Senior Senator from the 17th House, Senator from Jefferson, vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. The senator from Jefferson votes yea.
Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine to ascertain the results. On this question, 34 yeas, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House. Bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 5, creating West Virginia Unmanned Aircraft Systems Advisory Council. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senator Swope moved to amend the bill on page 1, section 18, line 9, by striking out the words representing the military and inserting in lieu thereof the words from the Adjutant General's Department.
Is there discussion? Senator from Mercer.
Thank you, Mr. President. The advisory council created by this bill has 5 members that are appointed by the governor. One of those members is referenced as from the military. The term military is very broad and implies that an appointee could be from any branch of the military and perhaps even any place in the world. By replacing that with from the Adjutant General's Department assures that that military representative will come from West Virginia here instead of some other location. I urge adoption of the amendment.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question is the Senate adopt, If not, the question before the Senate is the adoption of the amendment offered by the Senator from Mercer. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senator Stallings moved to amend the bill on page 1, section 18, line 8, after the word industry by inserting the words with at least 5 years of experience operating an unmanned aircraft.
Is there discussion? Senator from Boone.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, this is just to try to improve the 5 members, make sure that there are some experienced people on there. In discussion with the Senator from Mercer, and he certainly understands that. He feels that the governor is going to appoint someone with experience. But again, just placing in here the experience requirement of at least 5 years in the industry will allow this advisory council to function better, and I urge adoption.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Mercer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to confirm what the Senator from Boone just said, that having a minimum standard in the bill only adds value to the bill, so I support it.
Further discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the Senator from Boone. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 439, adopting Revised Uniform Athlete Agents Act of 2015. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 440, establishing Uniform Commercial Real Estate Receivership Act. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 450, updating definitions of West Virginia Personal Income Tax Act. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 451, updating definitions of West Virginia Corporation Net Income Tax Act. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 452, permitting civil remedies for unauthorized disclosure of intimate images. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 453, establishing uniform requirements for restrictive employment agreements.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our question now is consent that the bill be advanced to third read with right to amend.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading with the right to amend. Bill's on first reading. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our question, unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be considered read a first time and advanced to second reading.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Introduction of guest. Senator from Boone.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the gallery to the left is a dear friend and a former House of Delegates member from the Boone County area. We all know him as Chief, but would Troy Wayne Hendricks stand and the Senate give him a warm welcome?
Further introductions. Senator from Upshur.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we have with us a former delegate from Ritchie County, Mr. Woody Ireland. If he please stand and the Senate make him welcome.
Senator from Marion.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. In the South Gallery today, I have a very special guest with me. He's a young man, born and raised right here in West Virginia, and he now heads the Health and Safety Administration for my union, the United Mine Workers of America. Please welcome Josh Roberts to the Senate.
Further introductions. Remarks by members. Miscellaneous business. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Subject to announcements, I move the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Are there announcements? Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Finance will meet today at 3 p.m. in room 451M. We'll have a budget hearing for the Department of Health and Human Resources.
Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on the Judiciary will meet today at 3 o'clock p.m. in the Judiciary Committee Room 208 in the West Wing.
Further announcements. Senator from Wood.
Mr. President, banking and insurance will not meet today. We will have bills ready next Monday.
Senator from Upshur.
Mr. President, your Committee on Natural Resources will meet at 1 o'clock at 208 West.
Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure will meet tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., 4:51 a.m. The agenda has been posted.
Further announcements. If not, the question for the Senate stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. We'll be adjourned to 11 a.m. tomorrow.
The House will please be in order. Those persons not having privilege of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Members and guests in the galleries will please rise as we are led in prayer today by the gentleman from the 13th, Douglas Pinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we pray together today. Heavenly Father, it is a privilege to come to you again today with our heads bowed and approach you for our needs. Certainly today we acknowledge and we admit that we are needy people. Father, we come right now and we just ask that you would examine us. I pray that you would search us, search our hearts, Father, and I pray that you would forgive the sin of our country, forgive the sin of our state. Certainly we acknowledge our own sin, and we ask that you'd forgive us of our sin. Lord, we pray that we would be in a place personally and professionally where we could lead this state and lead it in a manner that would be pleasing and honoring to you. And Father, I pray that this morning for myself and for my colleagues. Father, I pray that you would help us to have your wisdom and your direction. And certainly we appreciate and we need your protection, but Father, I pray that we would also realize that we need your direction. Father, we come to you right now and we acknowledge that there are those in our body and the chamber across the Capitol that stand in need of your help because they themselves are sick or family members are sick. Father, I ask right now that you would be with the needs of Delegate Clark's family. I pray that you would touch him and his wife and their need. Father, I pray that you would be with the need of Senator Rucker's family and comfort them during this time. And Lord, we come to you and we ask that you would touch our hearts, Father, touch our minds, give us wisdom and clarity. And Father, may all that we do today and this week be pleasing and honoring to you. Lord, we ask it in Jesus Christ's wonderful and powerful name, and it's in the name of Jesus we pray, and amen.
All members and guests will please remain standing as we are led in the Pledge of Allegiance by the gentleman from the 60th, Douglas Forrest.
Please join me in our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members and guests may be seated. Reading the journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Friday, January 28, 2022.
Gentleman 58, Douglas Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and it be as proven as have been read.
The gentleman of 58, Douglas Miller, asks unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? No objections are heard. Introductions. Introductions. Gentleman of 7th, Douglas Barnhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've got some very special guests today from both Pleasant County and Ritchie County. First of all, joining us today from Ritchie County, we have a dear friend of mine and a former colleague, longtime public servant, great friend of our community. I'm pleased to welcome today former Delegate Woody Ireland. Also paging with us today from Pleasants County Middle School, we have Avery Bennett, and she is accompanied today by her mother Whitney up in the West Gallery. And I would just ask that they stand and that the House stand and make them feel welcome.
Gentleman 56, Douglas Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, paging for me, I have Zach Hammonds. He's right here in front of me. If he'd stand. He's accompanied today by his mother, Rebecca Hammonds, and grandfather, Ivan Crow, in the West Gallery. If they'd please stand, make them welcome.
The gentleman 66, Douglas Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the North Gallery, have several representatives of the West Virginia Horse Coalition. They're here for West Virginia Farm Bureau Day as well as Ag Day tomorrow. If anyone like me has unloaded a hay truck or a straw truck into a barn, a horse barn, you know that the horse industry is a big part of the ag community. So if they please stand as I call their names, from left to right, we have Tim Ketterman with the West Virginia Quarter Horse Association. We have Maria Cagnetti. She's the Executive Director of the Charlestown Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association, and Jana Tetrot from Mountaineer Park HBBA. Would the House please make them welcome?
The gentleman 6, Douglas Kelly.
Thank you and good morning, Mr. Speaker. In the South Gallery is the love of my life, my wife, and she's accompanied today by a grandson that we're both very proud of. Would you make them feel welcome, please?
The lady in 35th, Douglas Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am excited to have with us today a page from St. Albans High School, my good friend Ariana Rechtenwald, if she could stand for me, and her grandfather's up in the gallery, Charles Blake Jr., so if the House can make them feel welcome.
The gentleman 14th, Douglas Walmsley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we have Paige Cale Taylor with us from Point Pleasant Intermediate School. Cale is one of 26 West Virginians to serve on the West Virginia Olympic Development Team for soccer. And in the West Gallery, we have his father, Justin Taylor. Please give him a round of applause.
Gentleman 18th, Douglas Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have a Paige Keely Reynolds who's walking in the door right now. She's a 14-year-old student at Cabell Midland. She's very active or engaged in politics and also is studying Russian. And she's joined by her grandmother, who's in the West Gallery behind me, Miss Jenny Anderson, who's also a big advocate for the local school improvement councils. Will the House please make them feel welcome?
The gentleman 19th, Douglas Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I have with us 5 people that I'd like to recognize on behalf of both Delegates Booth and Delegates Lovejoy. Bill Stewart and his wife Dorothy are here with us up in the gallery, and he has been the chairman of the Legislative Committee and the chairperson leading the Guyan Conservation Group. He's also been a chairman of Wayne County's Farm Bureau and previously served on the State Farm Bureau. He's a great friend also of West Virginia's cleanup. And I'd like you to welcome Bill and Dorothy Stewart first. Also, Mr. Speaker, I have with us 3 people from the Rocky Knob Farm in Wayne County. Jason Eakers, who is a Wayne County Conservation Supervisor. He's also a board member of the Wayne County Farm Bureau and an agriculture mentor for Wayne County schools. And by his own description, he's Tabitha's wonderful husband. Also with him is his nephew Tanner Eakers. Tanner's a wonderful young man that I've never seen without a smile. And he's a volunteer as well with Jason, with the CK Autumn Fest and even the Pumpkin House. And with him also is his nephew Jacob Eakers, and I'd like the House to make them all feel welcome.
Further introductions. Reports of standing committees.
Your Committee on Senior, Children, and Family Issues has had under consideration House Bill 3054, expanding definition of who may apply for grandparent visitation, House Bill 3099, relating to grandparents' rights to visit grandchildren, and House Bill 4041, providing for an expedited hearing for grandparent visitation when one of the parents has died, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each do pass, but that they first be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
That report will be received. Those bills will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 4111, relating to the prescriptive authority of advanced practice registered nurses, and House Bill 4311, creating criminal penalties for illegal voting activity, and reports back committee substitutes therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitutes each do pass.
That report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2838, authorize the ordering of restitution to the state for reimbursement of costs incurred for misuse of public funds, and to create the State Auditor's Public Integrity and Fraud Fund for use of said funds, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, but that it first be referred to the Committee on Finance.
That report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Joint Committee on Enrolled Bills has examined, found truly enrolled, and on the 28th day of January 2022, presented to His Excellency the Governor for his action the following bills signed by the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Delegates. Senate Bill 8, relating generally to states' savings and investment programs, and Senate Bill 191, allowing poll workers to work full and half days.
That report will be received. Are there further reports of standing committees? Select committee reports, executive messages, Senate messages.
The Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed the following bills. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 246, requiring newly constructed public schools and public schools with major improvements to have water bottle filling stations.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Education and the Committee on Finance.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 431, relating generally to Uniform Controlled Substances Act.
That message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Prevention and Treatment of Substance Abuse and the Committee on Judiciary.
Senate Bill 435, awarding service weapon to retiree from Division of Protective Services.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 437, providing for early discharge of parolees.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 449, relating to nonviolent offense parole program.
The message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has adopted the following resolutions. Senate Concurrent Resolution 9, Haney Family Veterans Memorial Bridge.
The message will be received. The resolution will be referred to the Committee on Technology and Infrastructure, then the Committee on Rules.
Committee substitute for Senate Concurrent Resolution 11, Dennis E. Davis Veterans Nursing Home.
The message will be received. The resolution will be referred to the Committee on Technology and Infrastructure, then the Committee on Rules.
Committee substitute for Senate Concurrent Resolution 13, U.S. Army Private First Class Joseph Stanley McKinney Memorial Bridge.
The message will be received. The resolution will be referred to the Committee on Technology and Infrastructure, then the Committee on Rules.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 15, U.S. Army Private Shirley E. Bailey Memorial Bridge.
The message will be received. The resolution will be referred to the Committee on Technology and Infrastructure, then the Committee on Rules. Are there further Senate messages, petitions, motions, resolutions, bills introduced?
House Bill 4425, authorizing a law school program at Marshall University.
Lady in the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the delegate console system.
The lady in the 49th asked unanimous consent that the further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the delegate console system. Are there objections? There are no objections. Unfinished business. Bills on third reading.
Senate Bill 4, repealing ban on construction of nuclear power plants.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? No objections are heard. Gentleman from 29th, Douglas Steele, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to remove certain statutes, and you'll have to forgive me, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't given the little script I'm supposed to say about this bill, but
does the gentleman wish to delay consideration of the bill?
I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill repeals two sections of code that provided a limited ban on the construction of new nuclear power plants in West Virginia, and that's the entirety of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage, yes, gentleman from the 51st, Douglas Hanson, is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and apologies for pressing the button so late. I'm glad that we're discussing nuclear. I think this is a big issue, and that we're discussing a variety of types of energy sources in this legislature, not just nuclear, but geothermal, hydropower, solar, carbon capture, and storage. These are the types of discussions that are really essential for us to find ways to diversify our economy and bring jobs to West Virginia, even as we address climate change. As I think everybody's aware, nuclear is a carbon-free source of electricity, so that would allow companies that have sustainability targets or renewable energy goals to site here in West Virginia, should they choose to access nuclear power. It would give our state a foothold in a low-carbon economy, and the manufacturing jobs of the future are going to be low-carbon manufacturing jobs. So we ignore that shift to a low-carbon future at our peril, and I'm glad that we're considering so many options. And when I think about this nuclear repeal bill, or the ban, the repeal of the ban, I also think about it through the lens of the Coal Community Work Group, which is now the Select Committee on Coalfield Communities, because there's an urgent need to diversify our coal communities and our power plant communities. We heard that over and over again. We had 5 listening sessions around the state, and there were very common issues brought up across the state. People are open to new ideas, and it's related to this nuclear ban because the best sites in West Virginia for siting one of these new nuclear plants is on the site of a current coal-fired power plant, should that plant shut down. Now, at the same time, I think it's a complicated issue. I've heard a lot of constituent concerns about the nuclear waste and about the cost of nuclear. And in hearing from experts who came here to testify, my current understanding is that while the amount of nuclear waste might be less than a conventional nuclear plant with one of these new advanced plants, nuclear waste is still going to be generated, and there's no long-term solution for that. And while the costs are projected to be affordable, this is still an untested technology. These new plants haven't been built, and we don't really know for sure how much they're going to cost. So, in balancing those factors, I think it's a complicated balancing act. I'm not convinced that a straight repeal of the ban is the right approach. I'm very open to repealing the ban. In fact, I have a bill that I'm co-sponsor of that does just that, but it does it in the context of providing protections for ratepayers and trying to steer these new nuclear plants to the sites that currently have coal-fired power plants where they're needed the most. And I think that would be a better approach to move forward. The bill would have some additional factors for the Public Service Commission to consider when they're repowering a coal-fired power plant site in order to make sure that rates stay low. And it would also allow our electric utilities to refinance their debt on coal-fired power plants that are shutting down to save ratepayers money should those plants be converted to nuclear. So I just wanted to close by saying that even if the legislature passes this repeal, which I have no doubt it will, one of these plants is probably not going to be operational in West Virginia for about a decade. It's an unproven technology. It takes time to go through permitting and to build something like this. So we probably won't see a plant operational and generating carbon-free electricity for about a decade. So while we move in that direction, if we're moving in that direction, let's not forget that there are proven renewable energy technologies that we could build out today that will generate carbon-free electricity and bring a lot of jobs to West Virginia in the ensuing decade. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman, the first, Douglas Tesla, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oddly enough, I find myself in a unique position of agreeing with the gentleman from the 51st. I've worked on nuclear power plants. I've certainly worked on coal-fired power plants and a couple of oil refineries and all that kind of thing. There's plenty of history with nuclear power. 80% of France's power is nuclear. It's been developed safely. We have to be careful with nuclear power. The stringent rules that govern nuclear power that the NRC has are there for a reason. And I think before we jump into nuclear power, we have to be very careful. However, the track record is good, and we need to be in that game. I call on you as an example, our sister coal-producing state, Wyoming, lifted their moratorium in the last 2 years. They are going to build a small nuclear plant there. They're not eliminating coal in Wyoming by any means, but they are moving ahead. And they are, by the way, the leading coal producer in the United States. It is prudent to be an all-in state. It is prudent to have various means of generating power at your disposal. So for that reason, I think it's time for us to consider this, and I will be voting for it. Thank you.
The gentleman, the 25th, Doug Painter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm the furthest thing in this room from an environmentalist. That's laughable to even consider that in the same paragraph with me, but I just want to say nuclear is never a problem until it is, and then it's a big problem. I don't want to go down that road, and that's all. Thank you.
The lady from the 35th, Doug Young, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my time here in the legislature, I haven't often felt myself excited about a lot of the energy bills. Unlike my good friend from the 25th, I do consider myself an environmentalist. And I also agree with my friends from the 51st and the 1st. And I think that this is a super exciting day for clean energy in West Virginia. This effort has been bicameral, it has been bipartisan, and I'm really, really, really excited about the future. There's been a few issues raised, and they're very, very valid throughout the public hearing that we had last week. We had the interim meeting in January, and there's been a lot of concern, and I think that concern is valid. We've had some energy sources in West Virginia that not everybody's been happy about. I understand the trepidation of a new source of energy. Like my friend from the 51st said, nuclear is zero carbon. That is incredibly exciting. And we're one of only about 15 states that currently ban nuclear. The rest are going for it. And like the gentleman from the 1st said, France gets about 80% of their energy from nuclear. They also have some of the lowest rates of energy in the world. So I think that's exciting. Some questions that have been raised, regulations. Some people are worried that we're removing the regulations here. We're not removing regulations. The NRC is incredibly difficult to get a permit for a nuclear power plant, and the PSC will still have total control over energy creation in West Virginia. So that's not something that we have to worry about at all. Is nuclear cheap? No, it's not. Right now, it is not cheap, and I think that's okay. You know what else isn't cheap? Flood mitigation. Cleaning up floods is hard to do, something that is coming from climate change. But I do think that it is a large investment that we need to make in clean energy over the next few decades. And it's going to cost some money, no matter which route we choose to go. And I also, like my friend said, I don't think it's something we're going to see in the next decade. It's going to take a while to develop it. But I think it's exciting. When we talk about the waste or the spent fuel, I had the chance to go tour a nuclear power plant in December with several of my colleagues in this room and several from the Senate. And traditional nuclear, what happens now is the fuel, they can only use between like 5 and 10% of the fuel that's in the cell. So there's still like 90% radioactive fuel in there. They can't use it all. With these new advanced reactors, it's significantly different. They're able to use a lot more of the fuel that's inside of it. They're able to keep reusing it over and over and over again. So not only, these plants are smaller, but there's also going to be less waste. We got to see 40 years worth of waste in the dry casks. It fit on about half an acre. I will also say that nuclear waste is the only waste that's physically contained. Other waste goes into the air, it goes into water, it goes into the soil. All waste from nuclear power plants is physically contained. So I don't have much to say other than I'm really excited about this, and I genuinely thank the speaker for pushing us to do this, and I'm just really excited. I'm a yes. Thank you.
To jump to 15th, Doug Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One thing that I want to talk about, and we, as the GovOrg committee, we had the benefit of having a radiological preparedness plan specialist come and talk to our committee. And it was very intriguing to learn how this is handled. One thing you'll be aware of, though we still have this ban in effect in West Virginia, are you aware that West Virginia is part of this, I've got the plan right here in front of me, the West Virginia Radiological Emergency Preparedness Plan. And why is that? Because the Beaver Valley Power Station up north, many of y'all may be aware of, is within the 50-mile radius, requiring us to be part of this emergency preparedness plan. West Virginia is already preparing its counties to deal with whatever may be, if there is an incident at one of these power plants. We're already preparing for it. We just don't allow them to be here, but they are located on our borders. So we've already taken the step as West Virginia to prepare for these plans. And whenever we're testimony in committee, well, not only is West Virginia part of this, but all these counties are receiving specific training on how to react to it, particularly Hancock County. So just kind of to show you the standpoint of, it's not that nuclear isn't already here. We're saying, well, we don't have a nuclear in the state, and the problems that the gentleman in the 25th alluded to still exist here, the chance of that problem happening. But the thing is, it's just not locating in our state. So I would urge adoption of this bill, and see that I would encourage everybody to get familiar with these plans, these measures that we're already taking as West Virginia to prepare for locations in other states. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
To jump to 26, Doug Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The old scientist in me had to stand up. I don't know if you've ever worked in a nuclear environment. I have. I worked at Oak Ridge National Labs for 2 summers. Delegate Painter said it's not a problem until it's a problem. Yeah, he's right. I'll never forget going to a picnic there in the facility, and my dosimeter just going crazy. Just went off. It'll scare the daylights out of you. Everybody's dead. An isotope had somehow gotten into a old terracotta pipe, made its way into a tree. The tree became nuclear, or hot as we used to say, and we all had to go through decontamination. They rub the skin off of you. spray you with all kind of stuff. I'm not afraid of nuclear. I've been through it. I bombarded a lot of steel with molybdenum X-rays. I understand the safety procedures. They're good. But what if one person doesn't? It's not cheap. Don't say that it is. It's not. Do you know what it costs to enrich uranium or whatever fuel they choose to use? That cost is going to be passed along to the ratepayers. It's not cheap. Sorry. I got 2 or 3 emails here this week. Of course, it's February almost, and it's cold January, and the electric heat bills are just skyrocketed. I'm sure you guys have gotten some too. Coal is still the cheapest form of electrical generation by far. Those electric bills are going to go up even worse, and our people that are on fixed incomes, our people that are on low incomes, they're going to suffer. It's not cheap. Don't tell me it is. I've been there. The loss of a coal-fired power plant for a McDowell County delegate and a Wyoming County delegate scares the daylights out of us. Mr. Speaker, I worry about disposing the waste. Remember, those of you who were here for a while, we had a bill that, many years ago, I wasn't here. I was the president of the Kiwanis Club in Welch, and I had to approve or disapprove a resolution to allow them to store spent nuclear fuel in McDowell County. They were going to drill holes in the ground. I don't know how many feet there was, a lot. And we had a terrible argument about that all through our county. Who wants spent nuclear waste underground? Not me. I'm a scientist. I understand it. Chemistry is one of my absolute favorites. I taught a chemistry lesson on this floor once. But I'm telling you, I'm not for this. And I certainly hope that we don't experience a Fukushima. I know we don't get big tidal waves, or we do have earthquakes. And that waste does not go away tomorrow. It does not go away next week, next year, next decade. It's around for hundreds of years if we would have an outbreak. Having a plan to prepare us. Have you seen it? I've not. But I know what that plan will contain. I would just tuck my tail and run. I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to speak on this, and not just from a coal aspect, but from someone who's been around this stuff. Thank you very much.
The gentleman of 50th, Douglas Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having worked in power plants for over 33 years, I know a little bit about nuclear energy. Never worked in one, but I've been to 2 nuclear power plants now. But I do know a lot about coal, and I know a lot about gas and water and hydro. But, when I retired from First Energy in 2011, I was a material analyst, and I was visiting power plants, 9 different power plants in our system. I was helping them source material and control their inventory. There was, out of those 9 plants, there was 8 coal plants and 1 large gas unit, which was a peaking unit at the time. Since that time, since I retired, there's only 4 of those units still, or 4 of those plants still running. The gas plant has now become a base unit, and the other 3 are in West Virginia, Fort Martin, Harrison, and Pleasance. But the other plants, totaling over 2,500 megawatts, were shut down because they were coal. We've got an attack on coal, and I prefer coal over nuclear, of course, but we need these additional plants because taking 2,500 megawatts out of your system, that really makes your grid fragile. And so I just want to say that we need to ban or take this ban away because nuclear is safe, regardless of what some have said, because, we had one incident in this country where a 3 Mile Island, where one of the units there had a meltdown. The meltdown was contained. The only thing that made it bad was operator error. An operator opened a valve and released some radioactive steam to the atmosphere, and that was the worst thing that happened. But the meltdown was contained, all the other safety precautions, I mean, it all contained it. Everything worked fine, except for the operator made the wrong error. But since then, they've made changes to that. And also, the nuclear power plants that they're designing today are much safer, much more efficient. They're actually smaller than the units they were producing back in the 70s and 80s. They're about half the size. And anyway, nuclear is not, some people are saying it's expensive. Well, actually, it is expensive to build a nuclear power plant. Probably the most expensive power plant you can build. But once you get them built and once you get on the line, actually the cost is inexpensive. So, you know, that's the biggest cost is the building one. And but once you get them online, they're efficient. They run for long periods of time. They're dependable, and they make very good base units. And I urge adoption. Thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak on the bill? If not, gentlemen, the 29th to close debate on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, as most of you recall, when the Speaker calls on one of us to present a bill, he asks if we request unanimous consent to explain the bill in lieu of having it been read. And I probably should have said, no, I'll just go ahead and read it because it's actually much shorter than what I did. And I think it's important that you read the bill. That 1627A1 and 1627A2 of the Code of West Virginia, 1931, as amended, are repealed. It doesn't say, and we're tearing down all these coal-fired power plants, and we're building all these nuclear power plants, and we're doing all this other stuff. We're talking about good government here. You know, we talk about reducing government obstruction. We talk about lifting, you know, government restrictions. That's the whole purpose of this bill. A lot of the debate has gotten into how we're going to regulate it, how we're going to save coal jobs. Are we going to switch to nuclear and not use coal? This bill doesn't shut down any coal-fired power plant. This bill doesn't shut anything down except the government restricting the private marketplace. Now, it is a very heavily regulated marketplace. Let's talk about that for a minute. You know, some of the fears that we've heard and have been discussed have revolved around the regulatory environment. So, wait a minute, you know, what about the regulations that need to be put in place? Well, I've done a lot of reading, a lot of research, and I'm no chemist. I've never worked in a power plant or anything like that. And I'll admit I had to educate myself on a lot of this stuff. So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is who regulates nuclear power plants and nuclear procurement and so forth in the United States. And we are of a handful of states that are not a program partner with the NRC. Do you know how long it takes to become a partner state or a program state? 5 years on average. It takes about 5 years to go through that process with the federal government. And through that process, we'll work on the regulatory structure that we need to work on. We'll work on the education resources that we need in our universities and our technical colleges for workforce preparation. We haven't even discussed how we're going to tax it. You know, we got to look at that in comparison to how we tax solar and coal and wind and hydroelectric power. Industry concerns. We've got to talk to the industry of what concerns are in our code that would either be beneficial or detrimental to them potentially locating here. We have to deal with what we're going to do with spent fuel. And we need a lot of input from the federal government and the industry on how they do this. You know, I don't know anybody in here that's actually works in the spent fuel side of this that knows exactly what to do and how to write that bill. Transportation of nuclear. How are we going to do that? As an attorney that works in the trucking field, I can tell you that I don't think we've got a single driver that hauls uranium or nuclear fuel. So we need to talk about that. Fuel procurement. Where do we get it from? Do we just call up an African nation with yellow cake uranium and say, you know, send it on over through Amazon and let UPS drop it off? Absolutely not.
We have to have agreements. We got to go through the federal government and figure this thing out. Security and emergency response. As the gentleman from the 15th alluded to, we discovered we actually have a disaster plan, because as we've all seen that nighttime picture of the state of West Virginia from outer space and all the lights around us, apparently those are a lot of nuclear power plants of all those power plants around our state. And when we look at that, and we look at Kentucky's repealed their ban, we're going to have to update our disaster plan, our emergency response plan, to include the ones that they're talking about in Pike County and Floyd County and all around the Tug and the border of West Virginia and Kentucky. We got to talk about site selection and preparation. We got to talk about how do we engage communities that might be a favorable site. What stake do they have in it? What are they going to be able to put forth as, do we want one here? Do we not want one here? Even as that applies to spent fuel. So there's a lot of things that need to be taken care of. And to not do this bill today because we haven't figured that all the way out, it's going to take, as the gentlelady from the 35th alluded to, years for us to figure that out. What we're answering today is, are we willing to talk about it? Yes or no? And I think all of us in this room have an obligation to our constituency to engage a difficult topic and talk about it. And that's all this does. It's simply a repeal. It builds nothing, it spends nothing. It puts us in a position where we can talk to regulators, we can talk to the federal government, we can talk to the industry, and figure something out of, is it right for West Virginia? Because it's my personal feeling that it's wrong to foreclose the possibility of talking about it. And that's why I urge adoption. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 76 ayes, 16 nays, and 8 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Senate Bill 4.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2631 provides for West Virginia DNR officers to be able to work off duty.
Are there objections to having House Bill 2631 explained in lieu of having it read? No objections are heard. Gentleman, the 32nd delegate Fast to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is very brief. It allows the Chief Natural Resource Police Officer, in addition to contracting with public, military, or private entities, to also be able to contract with quasi-public entities. It also allows for our natural police officers or members thereof to contract to work for a private person or entity during his or her off-duty hours, provided that such contract work may not be a type prohibited by the code or the rules of the agency. That is a summary, Mr. Speaker, and I urge adoption.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman 56, Douglas Howell is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will gentleman yield?
Yes.
I'm assuming this would be something, the off-duty work would be like a security guard, an armed security guard at a business, or is that what we're authorizing here?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 92 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2631, provide for West Virginia DNR officers to be able to work off-duty.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2817, Donated Drug Repository Program.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? No objections are heard. Gentleman the 17th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill permits the Board of Pharmacy to administer a donated drug repository program. Eligible drugs include both over-the-counter drugs and prescription drugs. These drugs must be submitted in unopened, tamper-evident packaging and may not be a controlled substance. The bill establishes how the drugs are to be received, handled, stored, dispensed, distributed, and disposed. The bill permits a handling fee to be charged, but shall be based upon the reasonable cost to participate in the program. The bill permits rulemaking by the Board of Pharmacy to implement the program. That's a summary of the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 92 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 members absent. The majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2817, Donated Drug Repository Program.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, then the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 4048, West Virginia Keep, Bear, and Drive with Arms Act.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman from 35th to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The bill before you provides for the lawful possession in vehicles of loaded rifles and shotguns not being used for hunting. The bill removes the prohibition against carrying loaded rifles or shotguns in a vehicle if the person is not hunting or attempting to hunt. It removes the prohibition against carrying unloaded rifles and shotguns in a vehicle which are not in a case between 30 minutes after sunset until 30 minutes before sunrise if the person is not hunting or attempting to hunt. And it clarifies that possession of a rifle or shotgun is presumed to be lawful unless rebutted by a totality of the circumstances indicating the person is presently attempting or has recently attempted to take wildlife. The issue that we're addressing with this bill is a matter that's contained in Chapter 20. And it was cutting across the public policy of the state of West Virginia to provide lawful ownership and self-defense of with firearms in West Virginia. And Chapter 20 is reserved for wildlife conservation. And so we're adjusting it to provide and be consistent with the public policy of the state of West Virginia. I urge passage of the bill.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There were 91 ayes, 1 nay, and 8 members absent. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 4048, West Virginia Keep, Bear, and Drive with Arms Act.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 4097 to prohibit non-public funding sources for election administration and related expenses without prior written approval by the State Election Commission.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? No objections are heard. Gentleman to 32nd, Douglas Fast, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill amends West Virginia Code to provide that county clerks or other election officials cannot utilize non-public funding sources for election administration and related expenses without first receiving prior written approval by the State Election Commission. That is a summary. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 92 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 members absent. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 4097 to prohibit non-public funding sources for election administration and related expenses without prior written approval by the State Election Commission.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4257, require visitation immediately following a procedure in a healthcare facility.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman 17th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The committee substitute would require that during a declared public health emergency, a healthcare entity shall allow a person to visit a patient after the completion of a surgical procedure when the person is stable. That's a summary of the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman 16th, Doggett Lennon, is recognized.
Would the chairman yield?
Gladly.
Could you define stable for me?
I'm sorry?
Could you define stable? How is that defined in the bill?
Not sure it's defined in the bill. Medically, we would define it as you have recovered from anesthesia and you're hemodynamically stable.
Okay, so a patient in the intensive care unit may not qualify?
Well, I don't believe that would be the case, but I don't think they'd make it to the intensive care unit until they had already recovered from anesthesia.
I think I've probably seen different in my own personal life, but if I may, our bill last year, Megan's Law, I believe, I don't believe the gentleman's here at the moment. I'm continuing, if you would continue to yield. You know, sort of had little force and effect. Do you feel quite confident as chairman of the Committee on Health that this bill will have force and effect and establish the intent of this legislature to make sure that people can visit with a patient following a procedure?
That would be correct.
And you feel like there is no argument which could be made, which you know, supposing that they are hemodynamically stable, as you said, that would allow an institution to prevent them from having visitation from their family.
That would be correct, and the gentleman is reminded that this only applies when there is a health emergency.
Certainly, like the one we are in now.
That the gentleman would be correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question again is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There are 92 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 members absent. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4257, require visitation immediately following a procedure in a healthcare facility.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill take effect from passage.
The question before the House is the lady's motion that the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor of the motion will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There are 92 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 members absent. 2/3 of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4263, prohibit the practice of white bagging.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman 17th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this committee substitute is prohibit the practice of white bagging. White bagging is when health insurers don't let providers procure and manage a drug for their patients, but rather require a third-party specialty pharmacy to dispense the drug to the provider. This law mandates that all white bag drugs must meet supply chain security controls and prohibits a PBM from refusing to pay a participating provider or pharmacy for providing covered physician-administered drugs. That's a summary of the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman to first, Leggett McGee is recognized.
Chair, yield for a question.
Gladly.
Can you put this in layman's terms?
Okay, in layman's terms, what this bill affects to do is really eliminate some supply chain problems. There's, when you get into pharmaceuticals, chemotherapy and things of that are of a dangerous nature. And what this seeks to do is to keep the drug in the supply chain, in the chain of custody, meaning that it's not going to be mailed by a third-party entity. Maybe they mixed the dose of the chemotherapy up right, maybe they mixed it up wrong. But since it's outside of the control of the person that's going to be administering it, they don't know. So if the wrong dose was mixed up and administered, there's no real chain of custody to trace that back. So this is more of a chain of custody bill. There's no effect on the patient because, well, I say that, there's no effect provided the correct dose of the proper drug was shipped, since it's outside of the chain of custody, but there's no effect on the patient because the copays or deductibles are going to be the same.
Okay. And so this is going to improve some sort of efficiency too? And
well, this
also,
I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut the gentleman off. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, this is going to improve the efficiency because obviously the hospitals and infusion centers they have inventory that they purchase directly off the manufacturer. So in effect, what we're doing is we're speeding the process up. If you show up in the hospital and you've got acute leukemia, you're not going to have to wait 4, 5, 6 days until that chemotherapy shows up in the, quote, white bag that's mailed from the insurance company's specialty pharmacy. They're going to go ahead and administer it out of the inventory that they have. And then this bill goes ahead and says that provided they are in that network, they're in a network provider, then they have to cover the drug.
So obviously I don't know this industry like you do. Have you explored any downsides, any unintended consequences from outlawing this practice? Because I assume it came to fruition for a reason.
I really don't, because, again, this is a practice that, so I'm told from the hospitals, a lot of insurance companies have already done away with because they're, again, it slows it down for the patients potentially, and it makes the potential for problems, and they don't really work. And then we're going to ask the hospital, why was the wrong drug administered, or why was the wrong dosage given? And I don't think it's an acceptable answer to say, well, it's just what showed up in the bag. They don't have any way to trace it back with their quality controls inside the hospital. So I think this is more a bill to allow the hospitals to do their job.
Okay. I appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
No problem. Thank you.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Does the gentleman of the 17th wish to close debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There are 92 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 members absent. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4263, prohibit the practice of white bagging.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 4299 to prohibit the intentional interference with election processes and creating associated criminal penalties.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? No objections are heard. Gentleman to 35th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill amends our West Virginia Code to provide that no person may obstruct or interfere with a voter with the intention to delay, hinder, interrupt, harass, or intimidate a voter traveling to or from the polls. Additionally, it provides that such actions are a misdemeanor and provides criminal penalties. The bill does exempt legitimate exit polling and electioneering from this provision. We heard testimony in the committee that we've actually had instances, multiple instances in West Virginia, where folks are setting up outside of the buffer zone of our voting areas in West Virginia, and actually voters have reported that they've felt intimidated or harassed to vote in a certain way. This bill seeks to address those very situations in the state of West Virginia such that all of our voters can safely and efficiently and swiftly get to the polls without interruption. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? The lady with 38th, Edgar Graves, is recognized.
Sorry, sir, I just have a question, if I could.
Does the gentleman yield for a question?
Yes.
So I just want to make sure in my own mind that I'm clear on this point. Would this bill in any way prohibit anyone from passing out or using, let's say, a slate during like candidate season?
Answer to that question is it depends. If the passing out of that slate involves the the way that I would best describe the bill, and I think I've heard it best described, is the physical interruption of the freedom of movement of the voter. So if I'm sitting on the side of the street and I have a pamphlet and I'm just holding it out and you stop and you want to take it, that's great. But it becomes in contravention of this law if I step out and cause you to stop because I want you to take something that I have. Does that help?
That perfectly clarifies it. Thank you, sir.
The gentleman to 42nd, Eckert Longenegger, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chair continue to yield for another question, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So I think she may have answered my question, but I want to continue with this down this line of questioning here. Harassment is defined in many different ways by many different people. Some people in society today feel harassed if you say good morning to them. Some people in society feel harassed if you wave a banner in their face as they're walking down the sidewalk. So my concern is, or my question that is, and if you could elaborate, if someone is trying to make their way to the polling place, you, for example, you're going in to vote, and I'm waving my banner, don't vote for candidate A, vote for candidate B, and you feel harassed, what penalties would come my way, if any, please?
Well, the harassment would be a question of fact. So the fact finder would have to determine if it qualified as harassment. That would be determined in a court and determined by the fact finder, whoever that is. So it would obviously depend on the circumstances. The definition for harassment is not specifically spelled out in this section of code, but it's typically understood, I believe, in the courts of law to mean something, and I think that there is a line there. There is no bright line where it's laid out here, but to your example of the waving the sign, it would be my reading of the bill that as long as that was outside of the buffer of the voting area, and you were not physically obstructing the movement of the voter, then that would not qualify as harassment. That would be a speech issue because we're walking a fine line here. We don't want to restrict someone's First Amendment right to free speech. And that sounds to me like free speech.
Absolutely. Okay. Just wanted to kind of get some clarification here. Thank you.
Question again is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 92 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 members absent. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 4299 to prohibit the intentional interference with election processes and creating associated criminal penalties.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4324 to update collaborative pharmacy practice agreements.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? No objections are heard. Gentleman to 17th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of the committee substitute is to increase the usage of collaborative pharmacy practice agreements by reducing the regulatory burdens placed upon its approval. A collaborative pharmacy practice agreement is deemed approved if it is approved by a pharmacy and therapeutic committee of a hospital or similar medical executive committee within a hospital system, or if the agreement is between a physician and pharmacist. The practice agreement shall be submitted to the boards of pharmacy and medicine for review and approval. That's a summary of the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will, per the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 93 ayes, 0 nays, and 7 members absent. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4324 to update collaborative pharmacy practice agreements.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill take effect from passage.
The question before the House is the motion that the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor of that motion will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There were 93 ayes, 0 nays, and 7 members absent. 2/3 of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares that bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Are there further bills on third reading? If not, bills on second reading.
Senate Bill 244 relating to appointment of judges to Intermediate Court of Appeals.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 4110 relating to staffing levels at multi-county vocational centers.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 4286 relating to exempting persons employed as attorneys from the civil service system.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Rowe moves to amend the bill on page 2, section 4, line 35, following the words "as an attorney" by inserting the words "in a policy-making position."
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Gentleman 36, Delegate Rowe, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an important amendment to this bill. We are opening a door to political patronage that hasn't been opened in years. In fact, probably all of the laws that have been passed since we started civil service have been to tighten it and to make it clear that people who work for government are not supposed to be working as political patronage folks. Now, what the bill does very simply is that it exempts from civil service protection all attorneys in state government. You say, well, we already exempt judicial employees. That's true. We exempt legislative employees. That's true, because there's so much, the attorneys who are working with us are right here helping us make policy decisions. Now, what the amendment says very simply is that if the attorneys are in policy-making positions, then they don't have civil service protection. And you say, well, what attorneys, wouldn't all the attorneys be policy-making? No, on a percentage basis, very few. We have attorneys who work searching titles in the courthouse for DOH. We have attorneys who are public defenders. They're a part of the judicial branch, so they're not exempt as judicial employees. We have people who just who draft documents. We have people who serve in legal departments who aren't even close to the decision makers who would be affected by the work that they do. I would point out that the amendment is essential because it doesn't include other professions. I mean, like economists and accountants and architects. An architect can destroy a good idea if they say that it's going to fall down. So it's not that important decisions wouldn't be at issue, but the question is who makes those decisions. The attorneys don't make those decisions. As professionals, they recommend the legal ramifications or the parameters of decision making and go on. So I think that the amendment is essential to make this bill a clear statement that what we're doing is consistent with what we did last week. If you remember last week, we had a bill that said that the agency heads, bureau heads and agency heads in DHHR are policy-making positions. Therefore, they don't get civil service protection. And we had a provision that slowly, if you were hired as under civil service, you got to stay. But if you're newly hired, then you would not be under civil service. That's a consistent policy position with what this amendment would do. And the amendment very simply says that if the lawyers are policy-making, then they don't get civil service. But if they are policy-making, they don't get civil service. If they're not policy-making, they get civil service. This is a difficult issue for me because it's got a double negative about whether someone is exempt from civil service or not exempt. But I think that the amendment's very, very clear. It's very obvious. And I would just warn that if we don't adopt this amendment, that we're opening a door, a very dangerous door, that we've closed for many decades on political patronage. You know, it makes no sense to have perhaps thousands of attorneys in state government all of a sudden be to the subject of the will and whim of their employers. What we want is we want professional attorneys. We want them in professional positions, and there should not be political implications for them. They should be able to state their advice on a professional basis and not be concerned about the political fallout that might happen as a result of that advice. Just like the architect who says, look, it's going to fall down, you can't build it there. Or an economist who says that, oh, by the way, this is not going to produce any tax savings, or by the way, you're not going to get any jobs out of this. There's not going to be any economic impact. Accountants who tell you that you can't do it that way, that's contrary to federal law. And whenever you hear something that you don't like, you shouldn't be able to fire people. Well, it's just a common sense thing. Civil service is a good thing. A vote on this amendment on green is a vote for civil service protection in appropriate places, and that is, of course, not policy-making positions, but other positions in state government, and, by the way, in local government. This even affects local government. So I'd urge the members to vote in favor of the amendment. Thank you.
The gentleman, 29th, Douglas Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think in talking about the amendment, I got to talk about the bill a little bit as well. For starters, this bill only applies prospectively from July 1st, 2022. So it would not apply to those attorneys that work for the government currently that are part of the civil service system. Another thing that was brought up in committee, and I think was important to note, is there are attorneys that do enjoy civil service in West Virginia, and there are attorneys that don't. All the attorneys that you see in the House here today are not civil service. The people that work in our committees are at-will employees and not part of the civil service system. So some of the comments made by the gentleman would lend you to think that all of these people have civil service, and they don't. When this amendment was proposed in committee by the gentlelady from the 51st, there was mention of, some of these comments about political patronage and so forth. And a Supreme Court case was brought up as Akers versus West Virginia Department of Highways from 1992. And it's very important to know what the court said in that. A threshold inquiry in determining whether or not someone is in a policy-making position involves examining whether the position at issue, no matter how policy influencing or confidential it may be, relates to partisan political interests or concerns. That is, does the position involve government decision-making on issues where there is room for political disagreement on goals or their implementation? Otherwise stated, do party goals or programs affect the direction, pace, or quality of governance? If the first inquiry is satisfied, the next step is to examine the particular responsibilities of the position to determine whether it resembles a policymaker. Some of these would include, and I think the most important, is a privy to confidential information. Well, that's part of your job as an attorney, to be privy to confidential information and have to keep that secret and keep it between yourself and your client. And part of what governs a lawyer is the rules of professional conduct. And Rule 1.2, essentially, it's a very long rule, but it goes through how the attorney-client relationship is to be engaged in. And at the end of the day, while the attorney and the client can have a disagreement on how to proceed in a certain matter, or have a disagreement about the ultimate goals or something of that nature. Ultimately, the client is in control of that relationship, which in the explanation of that rule, which is provided on the Supreme Court's website in the comments, could include the client's prerogative to discharge the attorney. Now, so if an attorney is civil service, then they could not be discharged because of a disagreement on policy or something of that nature. Okay? And that's how this comes up, is ultimately the grant of the civil service, at least in my opinion and those that support the bill, a grant of civil service to an attorney almost negates the rules of professional conduct for the attorney. That attorney doesn't have to listen to the client. That attorney doesn't have to do exactly what that client wants, in this case, which is the government. Now, inherently in government, there are a lot of political interests at play. And a lot of times, as that case describes that the gentlelady had brought up in committee, those policy goals do include partisan goals, if that applies to the theory of what kind of government we want to put forth. So you know, painting this as just an abject political patronage issue, I don't think really does it justice, because ultimately we rely on attorneys in government to implement good policy. And that's what it boils down to, is having as part of that relationship attorneys that will submit to the will of the client. Now, that doesn't mean that the attorney, doesn't voice disagreement or say, hey, have you thought about this side of the issue? But ultimately, the client controls the representation. And with civil service, we can't really meet the demands of the rules of professional conduct as an attorney. So I would urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment, though I do understand where it comes from. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Is there debate on the amendment? If not, those in favor of adoption of the amendment will please say aye. Yes, gentleman from 36. No one has voted yet, so the chair will recognize the gentleman from 36, Doggett Rowe.
May I close, sir?
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I just want to say that attorneys advise. They don't implement. They're not the decision makers. I mean, we inherently are people who give advice. It's up to the decision maker, the policy maker, to decide what to do. Now, if that policy maker happens to be an attorney, okay, then they shouldn't have civil service protection. But what this bill does, without this amendment, is to take every single attorney in state government and local government out of civil service, creating a whole pool of people who may be subject to political patronage, who may be subject to having a decision maker decide that, well, I just don't like you and fire you. The issue is, are attorneys professionals who advise policymakers? And the answer is almost uniformly yes. And when you whenever you look at across the board the number of different attorney positions in state government, public defenders, where's the policy making in a public defender's office? Sure, they're part of the executive branch. They represent people in the judicial system, but they're not exempt. Employees of judicial system are exempt. Employees of the legislature are exempt. And it's because they're very close to, by the nature of the institutions, very close to the decision makers. So what we really are confronted with today is, are we willy-nilly going to just eliminate civil service protection from thousands of people who are professionals? And there's really no good explanation as to why in the world you're not including architects, accountants, any professional. And the reason that they're not included is because they truly are not policymakers. Civil service protection is one of the great fights in American history for justice, to get political patronage out of the system that we have. And we're opening a door here that doesn't need to be open. We've had civil service protection for decades, and you have to step back and say, why is it that we want to change this and define all attorneys out of civil service protection. There's just no good reason to do it. If you vote for this amendment, what you've done is a very nice, good, tailored decision to include policymakers as people who do not get civil service protection. That's a good thing. What this bill does is turn it upside down on its ear, and it says that all attorneys, whether policymakers or not, do not get civil service. So the amendment's very short, it's very easy. If the attorney is a policy-making position, then they don't get civil service protection. I urge the members to vote in favor of the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Roll call vote on the amendment is demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor of adoption of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on that question. There are 20 ayes, 73 nays, 7 members absent. Less than a majority in favor. Chair declares that amendment lost. Are there further amendments? Bill to be advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
House Bill 4312, extending the option of electronic absentee ballot transmission to first responders in certain emergency circumstances.
Are there amendments?
Delegates Doyle and Hansen move to amend the bill on page 1 following the enacting clause by striking out the remainder of the bill and inserting in lieu thereof.
Does the gentleman of the 67th wish to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read? Are there objections? No objections are heard. The gentleman is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is an excellent bill. And the delegate from the 51st and I are fixing to make it even a lot better. Now, during the 2020 election, we had lots of absentee voting, voting by mail, whatever you want to call it. It worked fine. There are half a dozen states in this union that are either entirely or almost entirely voting by mail, and we're including the very, very red state of Utah. And officials in those states will say, this works really well. It's at least as secure as in-person voting. Now, I know there have been stories around, one from West Virginia and one from North Carolina, about people who, shall we say, were engaging in skullduggery and sort of tried to manipulate ballots being delivered and that sort of thing. I think in one case it was 7 or 8, in the other case it was about 14. And the 14 was in North Carolina in 2018, not 2020. That's a very, very tiny amount compared to all the people who voted in 2018 and 2020. It's impossible to have a perfectly secure election, but the election we had in 2020, by every objective analysis, was the most secure we've ever had in this country. I think it is important not only that first responders be able to vote by mail, vote absentee, but that everyone be able to do so. And that is the purpose of this amendment, and I urge its adoption. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman, the 35th Delegate Capito is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the erudite gentleman from the 67th yield for a question?
Well, certainly, you threw me with the word erudite, sir.
I am looking over your amendment. I have thoughts on that, but first want to clarify. Do you intend to strike out providing our emergency certain, you're eviscerating the bill as I read it by eliminating what the bill is providing, which, as the title would say, the electronic absentee ballot transmission of first responders. So is it your intent to not allow them to electronically absentee?
Quite the opposite, sir. Okay. Quite the opposite. That language is gone, but first responders would be included in the everybody who would be allowed to vote absentee.
So they would be able to, under your amendment, vote by mail, but we're not going to let our first
Sir, that is
responders-
certainly my intent, or our intent.
Okay. You want to allow them to vote by mail, but not allow them to vote by electronic absentee?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, may I speak to the amendment?
Yes, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition and urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment. Universal mail-in balloting in the state of West Virginia, I don't think is something that the majority of West Virginians want to see. We are fully aware of the impacts that the pandemic had on our last election and would like to compliment our Secretary of State and our county clerks for pulling off what I consider to be one of the best performances of any of the states in 2020, considering everything that we had at hand. But as we get back to normal, I think that we appreciate and respect the importance of the ballot box. We appreciate and respect going to vote in our particular areas. Again, we've had bills on universal mail-in balloting. Those have been strongly rejected in the past. That is exactly what this amendment seeks to make this bill about, not what the purpose of the bill is about. And I would just like to add that we have taken good care to protect those that are most vulnerable and providing them opportunities to vote through mail. We're maintaining that with the bill that we have before us, but we want to be judicious about how we administer mail-in balloting, and I think we're doing that, and I think the law is fine like it is, so I'd urge rejection.
Question again is on the adoption of the amendment. Is there debate on the amendment? If not, those in favor of adoption of the amendment, roll call vote is demanded. Is the demand sustained? Yes. The delegate from the 51st has not sought recognition. Rather than seek recognition for someone, does the gentleman from the 51st wish to be recognized? Yes, gentlemen may close debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We had an experiment in the 2020 election in West Virginia due to COVID. And in that experiment, 145,000 West Virginians voted absentee. And according to the Secretary of State, that was the highest absentee participation ever in West Virginia. And what else did the Secretary of State say about the election in 2020? He said the election was deployed safely, securely, and accurately. We had an experiment. We proved we could pull it off and allow every West Virginian who's qualified to vote to have easy access to the polls. And that's what this amendment does. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question again before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Roll call vote was demanded and sustained. So the question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor of adoption will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 6 ayes, 87 nays, and 7 members absent. Less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares that amendment lost. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4333, relating to the sunset of the Board of Hearing Aid Dealers and Fitters.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4360, relating to West Virginia Invests community service requirements.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Are there further bills on second reading? Bills on first reading? Leaves of absence. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleagues, delegates Booth, Clark, Cooper, Fleshauer, Hardy, Jeffries, and Williams.
Are there objections to leaves being granted? For what purpose does the gentleman from the 22nd seek recognition? Delegate Maynard?
Oh, no.
Gentleman objects? Are there objections to leaves of absence being granted? No objections are heard. Introductions? Introductions. Gentleman with 34th, Douglas Boggs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the gallery to my right, former member Roy Hendricks.
Introductions, further introductions. Miscellaneous business. Gentleman 56, Douglas Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that remarks by the gentleman from the 66th on the 28th on the passage of HB 4024 be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Are there objections? No objections are heard. Further miscellaneous business. Gentleman 6, Douglas Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is this the appropriate time for an announcement?
No. Chair will recognize the gentleman for an announcement under. What's the nature of the announcement?
I'm sorry?
What's the nature of the announcement?
It can be done later. Thank you.
Miscellaneous business. If not, lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcements, that the House adjourn until 11 a.m. Tuesday, February 1st.
Are there announcements? Gentleman 6, Douglas Kelly.
And good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make a quick announcement if I can get my phone back up. It's a wild place in here today, Mr. Speaker.
Not really. We've seen worse.
Yes, we have.
Gentleman from the 6th.
May I go?
Yes.
Please do. The West Virginia Farm Bureau has asked for us to announce and remind everybody of their reception this evening at the Marriott. It's in the Grand Ballroom, and there's no need to RSVP, but they would like everybody to be there Monday, January 31st at 6 p.m. And Mr. Speaker, one last thing. I've never had a more difficult time making a simple announcement. Thank you, sir.
Gentleman 22nd, Douglas Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The subcommittee for House Bill 4001 will meet at 1 p.m. in the House Government Organization Committee Room. The full Committee on Technology and Infrastructure will meet at 1:45 in the House Gov Org. The agenda is posted.
Gentleman 32nd, Douglas Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Judiciary will meet this afternoon at 3 p.m. The Republicans will caucus in the Chairman's office at 2:45 p.m. That meeting will be held in the Judiciary Committee room. Also, tomorrow morning, your Committee on Judiciary will meet at 9 a.m. in the committee meeting room. The agenda will be posted. And also on Farm Bureau, being Farm Bureau Day, the Farm Bureau is providing boxed lunches for anyone who would like one right outside the chamber doors.
Gentleman 51st, Douglas Stowler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet today at 3 p.m. in the Education Committee room. The agenda is posted. The Republicans that can make it, and not in committees, will caucus at 2:15, and the Democrats at 2:45. Thank you.
Gentleman 15th, Douglas Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Government Organization Committee will not meet today. Again, we will not meet today. Thank you.
Gentleman 10th, Douglas Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. Your Committee on Energy and Manufacturing will meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. in Judiciary Committee room. The agenda is posted. Thank you.
Gentleman 31st, Douglas Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security will meet today at 1 p.m. in House Judiciary Committee room. The agenda has been posted.
Gentleman 16th, Douglas Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By way of announcement, today is the birthday of Cabinet Secretary / Curator of the Department of Arts, Culture, and History, Mr. Randall Reed Smith, the Cabinet Secretary who saves us well over $2 million every year. If you happen to see him in the hallways, please wish him a happy birthday.
Gentleman 27th, Douglas Gearhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Pensions and Retirement will meet today at 1 p.m. in the House Finance Committee room. Thank you.
Gentleman of the 11th, Douglas Keaton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow morning, Republican freshmen will caucus at 8 a.m. in the Government Organization Committee Room.
June the 13th, Dr. Pinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., the Child Care Caucus will meet in the House Education Room. And the purpose of our meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Will be to hear from Commissioner Pack about the changes that have been made within the Bureau of Social Services in the DHHR to continue to move the needle and assist in foster care and adoption issues in West Virginia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question before the House is the motion that the House stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow. Those in favor will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The House is adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.